Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Maybe I Can podcast. I'm your host, Debbie Weiss, and thank you so much for joining me today. I am very excited to be joined by a wonderful guest who I recently met, and she's a bright light, as you will soon see and learn. Her name is Lena Wilson, and she's a dynamic transition coach, three-time author, and CEO of Real Inspiration LLC. With 25 years of corporate HR experience, she empowers individuals and organizations to navigate change with clarity, confidence, and strategy. Her work focuses on career and life transitions, leadership development, psychological safety, and wellness from within. Known for her warm presence and transformational insight, Lena helps midlife professionals turn uncertainty into opportunity, and she supports leaders in being trusted voices during seasons of change. She is the creator of the Transition Blueprint, a signature framework guiding audiences to reframe setbacks, reclaim their voice, and reignite their next chapter with purpose. Lena is passionate about empowering others to not just survive through change, but to thrive through it. Born in the U.S., Lena was adopted at the age of 2 and grew up on the beautiful island of Trinidad and Tobago. She now lives in Central Florida with her husband and teenage daughter. Lena, welcome to the show. And do you say Tobago or Tobago?
We actually say Tobago,
Oh,
Debbie.
I was going to say that, and then I thought, I don't know. Uh,
I trust your instincts. So thank
uh,
you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
well, thank you for joining me. I just, when you and I met a week or so ago,
Mhm.
and we were chatting, some of the things that I asked you or we talked about, you literally said almost exact sentences that would come out of my mouth. So I definitely feel like you and I are on the same
Yeah,
page on a
we have
lot
a
of
great
things.
connection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me start with asking the same question that I ask all my guests. Can
Mhm.
you tell us about a time when you went from a defeated, I can't attitude to an empowered, maybe I
Mhm.
can mindset?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a couple that come to mind. My first one that comes to mind is really my divorce, but let's stay there for a little bit because that's one of the most significant transitions that I've experienced in my life. And I remember when everything kind of crumbled, I remember feeling quite defeated. And I was in this victim mindset for a minute there because I was like, why did this happen to me? I don't understand. And I really sat in this very dark space and I felt like I was the victim of, something horrible that had happened to me and felt quite defeated in that space. And as a result of feeling defeated, I did absolutely nothing to help my life kind of progress and heal and go beyond the pain of what had happened. And at the time when I had gotten separated, my daughter, who's now a teen, she was only 10 months old at the time.
Wow.
And so I am trying to navigate this very dark space. I'm a new mom with this baby girl, and I'm just thinking, why did this happen to me? And then one day as she started to walk and she's starting to talk a little bit, I realized that I owed it to her to be the best possible mom that I can be. And that epiphany really helped me to realize that, hey, you've got to pull yourself out of this, and no one can do that for you. I was responsible. I wasn't responsible for the pain and the hurt, but I was absolutely responsible for my healing and for doing the work. And that shifted from that victim mindset to really doing a lot of the hard mindset work and really understanding that life unfortunately comes with a lot of ups and downs. Some are more painful than others. However, it is our responsibility to really do the work to really still try to live the life that we want to live. So that was one of those moments where I felt quite defeated for a while. For months, I was terribly heartbroken, but then realized that, look, the victim mindset wasn't serving me any longer. And I needed to do that hard work to pull myself out of that so I could be the best mom to my daughter and be a better version of who I was created to be.
I'm guessing the divorce came as a surprise. It was not something you were expecting.
The marriage was definitely crumbling
Mm,
prior to that, but I thought that we could recover. I
yeah.
genuinely thought that we would be able to recover, especially because we had this beautiful little girl. But unfortunately, we never recovered from that, and that was difficult for me, very, very difficult. Because you have all these views of a family and this baby girl, and the timing of it was hard because you already have all of these emotions as a new mom,
Oh, yeah.
and then you compound that on top of it, and it's just a lot.
It certainly is a lot. Boy,
Yeah, yeah,
especially with, yeah, so many things with a newborn and thinking, I'm sure that this is not what I wanted for her, right? And to
exactly.
have to deal with a newborn by yourself.
Exactly, exactly. You suddenly move from this family unit to now being a single mom. So all of the things happening, I had just started a job like a year before that. There was just a lot of transitioning happening simultaneously. And 6 months before that, my dad had passed away. So
My
it
goodness.
it it truly was one of the darkest seasons of my life. But I definitely believe it doesn't matter how hard life looks and feels, you certainly can get through any adversity you face.
Was there anything in particular? I know you said, and I get it, you just realized, had a wake-up call and realized you don't want to do this to your daughter and to be the best mom, but was there anything in particular? Like, you were talking about doing the work, and I know for myself, I
Mhm.
didn't really understand what doing the work meant,
Mhm. Mhm.
or I think I started doing the work and I didn't know I was doing the work, if that makes sense. Was
Yeah.
there something in particular? Were you starting to read things or listen to things, or you had already been in that space?
So I will say that being in this dark space for months, I realized that I needed to deal with the scar of rejection that I had been carrying all my life. So, as you read in my introduction, I was adopted. My parents told me at the age of 12. And then the divorce just kind of really compounded in the most painful way. Yet another situation in my life where I felt abandoned and rejected. And the more I thought about how painful the rejection was, the more I realized that this was just something I had been carrying all my life.
Yeah.
I saw everything from the lens of rejection. And I think thinking through that and realizing I've got to get to the root of this deep pain. And if I can get to the root of that, that even if it manifests again later on in life, I'll be able to manage it in a lot healthier way because I've dealt with the root of it. I had never dealt with the root of it prior, but it
Yeah.
manifested itself in different ways. And so I think it was just realizing that I had been carrying just the scars of rejection for many, many years, and it was time to deal with that, which made it really painful, but worth it to do the work to heal.
Absolutely. It's
Mhm.
funny, I was talking to a friend last night, and she was telling me, I don't remember if it was about her husband or somebody else. It was a man though, and he was, let's say,
Mhm.
70. And she
Mhm.
said, "Can you believe that he still is thinking, whatever it was?" And I said, about himself. And I said, "This is what happens. We don't even realize that
Mhm.
we're acting from that place, or how much of an impact our childhood had on us and the things
Absolutely.
that we were taught, or not necessarily intentionally,
Yeah.
right? But that we believe about
Yeah,
ourselves."
absolutely. Yeah, it shapes our identity.
It does, and
Mhm.
I think it's our life's work to try and get past that, right?
Yes.
It's an ongoing journey. I don't know about you. I think
Absolutely. Yeah, for
right?
all of
It's
us. We're always
exactly,
growing and evolving, always. Yeah.
exactly. So, let's go to your career first. So, how did that all start, and why did you decide to actually leave it after 25 years?
Oh, so that's such a great question. I had been very successful in corporate. I worked for one of the largest banks in the country, and I worked my way up from an officer all the way up to a senior vice president when I left. And there were lots of changes happening. So, we had the pandemic, and post pandemic, there were just a lot of changes that had been taking place, and the landscape of the workplace, even now, still continues to change and shift. And I had my business part time prior to leaving. I did it part-time, and I really got to the place, and we talked about this a little bit last week, how
Yeah.
I turned 50 a couple years ago, and I just started to feel like, "Man, how do I wanna be remembered? What do I want my legacy to look like in life? And am I on the path to really creating that based on the trajectory that I had been on. And I realized that even though I was very successful in the corporate space, there was more that I wanted and desired from my life. And I figured if I didn't do it now, I probably would never do it. And certainly there was a lot of risk and fear that came up for me because I'm stepping out of this very familiar, stable, place. But it was really a desire for more and to be more in alignment with my purpose and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to serve the world and the impact I wanted to leave. And so I made that decision last year, July, that I was going to pursue entrepreneurship full time and just continue to just evolve in the work that I had been doing. A lot of it I had already been doing as a coach in the corporate space. And so it wasn't a difficult transition from that perspective based on the work that I do, but it certainly was a transition in, of course, leaving the corporate space, having been sometimes I say I grew up in corporate a little bit because I mean, total, I was in corporate for 32 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so 25 of those, I was definitely aligned to human resources in some capacity, but just felt like, look, I wanted to take this risk and bet on myself and really live in alignment with who I think I'm created to be, which is to coach and to inspire and to encourage others to really navigate transitions and grow through the process so that they can live the life that they deserve.
It's funny as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about my youngest son is about to graduate from college in
Oh,
literally a
how
minute, a
exciting.
week.
Yeah.
And so I say to him, now I come from a different perspective. And it's interesting how I, hear other kids and, their parents are like, forget the entrepreneurship because not my son, but other kids, they're more entrepreneurial. It's a different age than when we
Mhm.
grew
Different
up and when,
generation, yep.
right?
Mhm.
And so what did you do when we grew up? This is what success was. You get a job, usually in a corporate setting, and you
Mhm.
just climb the ladder of success.
Yeah.
And, I'm thinking of one of my kids' friends, and his parents just are like, he's doing that in the entrepreneurial space, but they don't consider that a real job.
Mhm.
And so I say to my own son, not what are you going to do to make money, but what do you want to do? What does your heart tell you you want to do? And
Mhm.
that's such a different space, I think, than when we
Mhm.
grew up. And it's funny because my son, I think he knows where his heart is, but he feels like he has to give corporate a try.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
we're conditioned, but now, I'm coming from a different place because not that and it doesn't sound like you were unhappy in your career.
not at
Right.
all. Mm-mm.
Yeah, but it just wasn't lighting that fire, that passion.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for me, part of what happened also was just thinking through so aligned to what you just said. My parents, grew up, "Hey, get a good job and stay at that job and retire from that job." And what I realized is my definition of success started to shift, right? That no
Yeah,
longer just was who I was or who I wanted to be. And so that's kind of the thing that happens sometimes is that you kind of by default, you fall into this version of success, either because of how you were raised or nurtured or what you think success should be. But then as you become very authentic to who you are and you become bolder in being who you were created to be, your version of success could change. And I think for me, that definitely shifted along the way. So I definitely, and sometimes, like in the case of your son, he has to find his way,
exactly.
and we have to give our children space to do that.
I agree. I think too that, we had to go, speaking, you know, for both of us, I think that going through those hard times, right,
Mhm.
is what that gave us the experience to say, okay, there must be other women out there, other people out there who are going through something similar. And I've gotten past it. And now I want to share that with someone. And at 20, whatever, two,
Yeah.
you haven't lived through a lot of stuff yet.
Nope.
Yeah.
Still
Hopefully.
finding out who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. When we look back, oh my goodness, I wouldn't even recognize, the young woman I was at 22. I don't know about you.
Neither would I.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Yeah. So
So I'm guessing, is that the case? You came through the other side of your difficult situation and you felt that you wanted to help others do the same?
absolutely. I did not become a life coach until post my divorce. And one of the things I realized, Debbie, when I was going through that experience was so many women get lost in their pain and they don't recover.
Yep.
They just don't recover. I was very fortunate and I was able to build resilience eventually, right? I was able to build a level of resilience that allowed me to recover in a very powerful way. But some people don't recover, and it's partly because they don't know how. And they allow that situation to kind of define the rest of their life. And so I think having gone through that, my goal and my desire is to help people to really not just know that they can recover, but let me show you how you can do that and still live a very fulfilling life, even if life hasn't been, kind to you along the way.
And I think, even if you on the surface look like you're recovered, there's still a level of bitterness and resentment and that victim mindset. Why me? Why did
Mhm.
this happen to me? What did I ever do to deserve this kind
Yeah.
of thinking? And, comparing yourself to what you think are happy and perfect people
Mhm.
when you don't know what's going on with them. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, the tools, and let's talk about your transition blueprint. What is that? Where did it come from? And tell us more.
Yeah. So the transition blueprint really was just derived from, I think, a combination of my own experiences, kind of working in corporate and really looking at change from a very comprehensive perspective. So there are lots of different change models out there, but I don't think that we always factor in that there are so many components to change, especially if you've gone through back to back changes. Sometimes we don't even pause to breathe through them, and it's so necessary. So, the transition framework, blueprint framework that I created really takes into consideration a lot of very important pieces to help you not just like survive the change, but really thrive through it. So, we talk about mindset. There are 6 different pillars. So, we talk about mindset and really think and really deal with how are you thinking about this change? What are your limited beliefs? And what do you need to shift in order to get through the change? We also talk about your emotions and how do you regulate those emotions. It's not okay to pretend that you're fine if you're not fine, right?
Yeah.
You have to pause, you have to acknowledge that you have these emotions and really name them and then figure out how do I move forward, acknowledging the emotions. Then we talk about really how do you build that resilience along the way because change can be really difficult and depending on the depth of the change, it takes months, years. It varies, right? To get
Yep.
through. It's not like I snap my fingers and you're okay.
Oh,
And so
no.
how do you build your resilience along the way and take care of yourself as you heal or whatever the case might be? And then how do you realign your goals? I mean, when I got divorced, it changed the entire trajectory of what I thought my life was going to look like. So I had to pause and realign some goals and then we talk about building your confidence, right? Talk about somebody who lost their self-esteem along the way. That was me. I just almost didn't know who I was at any longer. And so sometimes you have to rebuild your confidence through change. If you get a new job, you were laid off, you get a new job. Now you have to rebuild your confidence to do something that you hadn't done before. And then the last piece is just really igniting your momentum. So once you've really thought about your mindset, your emotions, your resilience, and then your realigned goals, I help create like a strategic plan to help people continue to build that momentum so that what happened or the change that you experience doesn't paralyze you, but now you have a strategic plan to move forward very confidently and successfully in that change.
I love and agree with all that. And isn't it funny, especially you coming from corporate, you, at least in my case, you think about a business plan or a strategic plan when it comes to your work life, but it's not so often that you think, oh, that also applies to my own
Right.
actual personal life.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. We somehow just don't translate that automatically. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's the whole idea of just kind of drifting through life, and wherever it takes us, we just allow it. I don't know about you, but I remember the first time that someone said to me, well, what are your dreams? What does your dream life look like? And I thought, I have no idea.
I
I don't think
remember.
since I was a kid or a teenager where
Yeah.
I had it all plotted out in my head, then life happens and
Mhm.
those
Yeah.
dreams just fade.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. I remember having that question. They asked your ideal life, and I'm
Yep.
thinking to myself, ideal life? There's such a thing?
Yeah, exactly. Does that really exist? Or is
Yeah.
that just in a Disney movie?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Uh, so yeah, the framework really does help you. It can apply to corporate or personal, and it just looks at change from a very comprehensive perspective.
And I'm sure when people come to you, I mean, that feeling of overwhelm of,
Mm,
you're so stuck and you're feeling hopeless, right? Most of the time at
yeah,
that point, you're just like,
absolutely.
I
Mm,
you don't know my exact circumstance. My exact circumstance is different from yours, so mine is worse. So how am I ever getting out of this? And I think too that for me, I needed to know, well, exactly how. I wanted to know the exact steps. And I think we have to realize we don't have to know the exact steps.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And even though it's a framework, everybody's situation is different and we process things differently, right? So
Yep.
it gives you a guide, but at the end of the day, you have to apply the framework and figure out how that meets you where you are in order to move past wherever, you're struggling through change. And the struggle is understandable because it usually is jolting us into a space that we've not been before, good or
Yeah,
bad. Mhm,
exactly. Do
mhm.
you find that there's a space where most people just get stuck in this transition, or is it, all over the map? Do people have most trouble with changing their mindset or the emotions, or what is it?
I would say most commonly it would be mindset. That's
Yeah.
probably the biggest place that I see kind of what we talked about, the victim mindset, people who've not dealt with some of their past nurturing that impacts their limiting beliefs. Fear is I would say mindset and then the emotion of fear, right? Those
Yes.
those two are dangerous together, right? People know a lot of times what they want to do, but they're afraid. They're afraid of failing. They're afraid of what people will say. They're afraid of what if this doesn't work. Fear shows up. Doesn't matter what age or where we are in life. Fear will always show up when we try to do something we've not done before. And so if you have a limiting belief plus fear, you're paralyzed. You just
Exactly.
are. Yeah. So
Yes.
I would say mindset and then the emotion, anything that fosters fear is where people absolutely get stuck.
That's, my memoir is called On Second Thought, Maybe I Can. And the reason it is
Mm,
called that is because I was always so fearful that if somebody presented an opportunity to me, and it
mhm.
could be as small as, I don't know, you want to learn how to kayak. No, no, I don't do that.
Oh,
Because there
wow.
was always a reason in my mind. It was like a protection, at least I thought it was a
Yeah.
protection mechanism
Mhm.
because my limiting
Mhm.
belief was feeling unworthy or fear of being judged, right? And
Mhm.
failure, all of it.
Oh, yeah.
And so, just saying no keeps you in this like little box.
Yep, you're in this bubble. Mhm.
Yep, you're in that little comfort zone box where you think, "Okay, I just have to stay here and everything will be okay." And then
Mhm.
I think when sometimes life forces you to get out of that comfort box, right? Or that comfort zone, even when you don't want to.
Yep.
And you tell me if your experience is the same, even though now I know that it's facing our fear that has us grow and progress. I found that every time I have faced my fear, even if it doesn't turn out the way I think, it has been a life-changing experience.
99% of the time, right? Like, yeah, it's even and I even with leaving corporate, there is a possibility that this may not be successful, right? Like
Yep,
I have some big shoes to fill, but even over the past, it's not quite a year, I just can't even describe how much I have transformed just from, doing something. So I say if it doesn't work, I still become such a more dynamic and powerful person in the process. It would be absolutely worth it, but it's going to work.
I,
So
it's working. It's
it's
working. We
working.
don't,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I mean, do you think in your case, look, you're reinventing yourself.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear how, do you have any stories of some of your clients, how they have reinvented themselves maybe in ways they never thought of before?
Absolutely. So while most of my clients are women, I actually probably 2 years ago, I actually coached a male who wanted to move out of the corporate space. So the funny part is I was still in corporate at the
Oh
time,
gosh.
coaching, this individual to move out of corporate. And he had achieved a lot of success, but he was just ready to do something that was on his heart to do. And I remember walking through that journey. And now that I'm saying this to you, I'm thinking, well, maybe that kind of gave me some inner courage that I didn't even realize, right? To
Yeah.
started to churn. But yeah, and so long story short was we did coaching for about 12 weeks. We did a pretty extensive coaching and strategy, and he had his plan. And 3 months later from when we ended our coaching, he left his corporate role and continues to be wildly successful in doing something that he was terrified to do. And here's the thing that I've learned, it's not very complex. It's people know that they want to make a change, but they don't always know how and they don't have a plan. So, one of my what I call superpowers is helping people uncover what that plan should look like. Because it has to be a smart strategic plan. It can't just be any plan, right?
Yeah.
And so, a lot of times, if we have a plan and we know what pieces need to happen and when they need to happen, it builds our confidence because we know where we're heading. It's like having a GPS in the car. You know the GPS is going to get you to your destination. It's no different with I'm going in a different direction. I've never been to this destination before, but I have a plan and a strategy to get there. And if I follow it and I'm disciplined, even when I don't feel motivated, because Lord knows some days we don't feel motivated, right, to do what we need to do.
Absolutely.
I still follow the plan, and so that was probably one of my very special stories because you can coach people, but they don't always follow the plan,
Yes.
and their journey and their progress is longer, or they get discouraged because they don't see the results fast as they would like, you know?
Yes.
But that was certainly one that, implementation and execution really yielded very successful results.
I want to know, what does he do that he was so afraid to do?
He actually has a business where he does like woodworking. So he creates different things. Yep. He creates different
Wow.
things and wasn't sure if there would be a market
Yeah.
for some of the pieces that he creates. And he's just been able to find his niche and his clients and does very well and has uncovered this additional layer of creativity that he would have never uncovered had he continued to stay in corporate.
Oh my goodness, that really resonates with me. And let me ask you, with your books, for me, I never wanted to write anything. I never had any desire to write. And I think this journey, that's what it's done. I would say, if anyone asked me, I would say, I don't have a creative bone in my body.
Mhm.
And since
Mhm.
the transition and doing the work, I've
Mhm.
discovered, oh, wow, that's not necessarily true. And just like you say, I uncovered another layer about
Mhm.
myself that I didn't know existed. What about you? Tell me about your writing and your books, and where did that come from?
Yeah, so I never said, "Oh, when I grew up, I want to be an author." That was not me. As a little girl, I wrote poetry. I did
Uh-huh.
write poetry. I enjoyed poetry, but and my major is communication studies. I wanted to
Okay.
be a journalist actually at one point. So, but I never really said I wanted to be an author, and I absolutely never said I wanted to be an entrepreneur. That was like that wasn't even, you know. However, part of kind of what I shared earlier, I felt like in order to really kind of pull the thread all the way through the needle, I felt like I needed to write about my experience and how I was able to overcome that. So while I've co-wrote 2 other books, my main book, which is Broken Heart Still Shine, I really am very transparent, really transparent and vulnerable, and I talk about where my rejection started, how it showed up in my life, and then I talk about, the divorce and that journey. So that's the first part of the book, and then the second part of the book, I talk about really specific steps that I took to help me move my life forward, right? So, and I will tell you, it felt uncomfortable kind of being that vulnerable, talking about my story, because I'm
Mhm.
like, you don't know where this book is gonna land, right?
Exactly.
But I got to the point in my journey where it was more important to help people get free and transform than it was about my pride and shame that was attached to some of my story.
I swear, I think we're soul sisters. I had the same experience when I was writing. I mean, wasn't it cathartic too, as
It
well?
was. Of course, yeah. Yeah, and that was your experience as well? You
Well, I have always been an open book. My mother would always say, "Debbie, you don't have to tell everyone everything." And even today, she'll still say it will be, I'm in New Jersey, she lives in Florida. We don't see each other that much, but
Yeah.
last year or something, we were at the getting our nails done together here.
Mhm.
And she said, "I've never seen anyone talk so much to so many people when getting their nails done. What are you talking about?" I said, "I don't know. I just keep talking. I don't know. I enjoy people's company." But anyhow,
Yeah.
I've always been point being, I've always been an open book. So I guess I wasn't too scared, but there was one thing that I was not going to tell anyone. Well, two
Mhm.
things, but
Mhm.
the other thing was something I couldn't talk about because other people
Mhm.
involved did not want me to. But
Right.
there was another thing that I was so deeply ashamed of
Mhm.
that I originally did not put it in my book.
Mhm.
This is my first one. I did
Mhm.
not put it in my book. And then I thought to myself, I pretty much had like three-quarters of the book written.
Mhm.
And one day I was meditating and something just came to me to say, you have to do it. And just for the same reason is that if I'm feeling so ashamed about this situation, it was a situation with money. If I'm
Yeah.
feeling so ashamed, that means that there's others out there who
Mhm.
feel the same way. And they could
Mhm.
be looking and listening to me and thinking, oh man, that woman has it all together,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? None
Mhm.
of us have it all together.
That's right.
We're all a work in progress. And I thought, I think about how I benefited from hearing other people's stories that I can relate to.
Mhm.
And so if I'm not going to be completely transparent, then what am I doing here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think even after I put it in, every time that someone I knew told me they read the book, it was uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
especially because I have this, fear of being judged. This was like, oh
Mhm.
my goodness,
Mhm.
mega fear of, are they looking at me differently? How do they
Mhm.
think about me? And it
Mhm.
was really just kind of shifting my thinking to remember they've got their own secrets that, they're not comfortable sharing. And maybe this will inspire them,
Yeah.
to do the same and move past it. But that is
Yeah.
difficult and it is very vulnerable.
It is, and I'm the opposite, so I'm pretty private. So
Okay.
I'm pretty private. So there was that layer that I had to get through, and then I tried to write in such a way where I spoke about my truth, but I
Mhm.
still honored the father of my daughter. And so I never wanted to, while the book definitely talks about what happened, there was still a layer of honor that I wanted to maintain through that. And so I think there was this dance that I was doing a little bit
Yes.
in being vulnerable and telling my truth. But I always said to myself, at the end of the day, no matter what happened, this is still the father of my daughter,
Yeah.
right? And so trying to honor that and still tell my truth, there were moments where it felt really hard, really, really hard. But I knew that I wanted to help other people, free themselves from the shame that comes with divorce, especially in a Christian community that could be even more difficult sometimes.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And as we are coming to the end, if
Mm.
someone's listening and feeling stuck but doesn't know what to do next, what would you say to them today?
So I think what I would share is, first of all, you're not alone in your journey. We have all felt stuck at some point in our lives, and I think sometimes we feel like we're alone, and we're the only person that feels that way. So I want to just kind of dismiss and dismantle that thought that you are not alone. I think it's important to really identify what exactly is causing you to be stuck. Because we say that we're stuck, but what does that mean exactly, right? Is it I'm stuck because I'm afraid? Is it I'm stuck because I don't have resources? Is Am I stuck because I need a coach to help me along? Like, what is the root of why you're stuck? And really try to figure out what that is. And if you can't figure it out, then you absolutely need some support, whether depending on what the issue is, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a coach like myself, or whether that is you just need to be more courageous and start taking baby steps. Sometimes we feel like I'm stuck and I'm trying to get from here to there and I need to leap to there, not really realizing that if I take small incremental steps, I'll get there eventually, you know? And
Exactly.
so, not feeling like you have to take the entire leap, but just taking one step at a time and trusting the process along the way. I would also say that you are worthy and you are deserving of living a life that you absolutely love. Sometimes we get so bruised along the way that we don't think that we're worthy of living a beautiful life. And so, for the person who feels stuck, for the person who's in a lot of pain, your heart can heal and you're absolutely worthy of finding joy, peace, and a fulfilling life. And so that would be my initial encouragement to those who may feel stuck.
Beautiful. I think that's a perfect way to end. If you don't mind, Lena, can you tell listeners where they can find you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, at Coach Lena Wilson. That's pretty much my name across social media. And then, of course, lenawilson.com is my website. So that's kind of the central hub. That's where I would recommend that you go and you can uncover anything you need to know or schedule time with me if you need to.
Wonderful. Lena, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
All right. And everybody, we will see you next time.